Quantum Architect, The Reality Game Book 1, The Trap Chapter 1. The key in the traffic jam. The rain beat against the limousine's roof. With an insistence bordering on obsession, Alice closed her eyes, listening to this monotonous drumming. Her driver skillfully maneuvered between the streams of cars, but nothing could speed up their movement during rush hour. Miss, traffic jam. Minimum 40 minutes, the driver reported through the glass. Alice sighed. 40 minutes alone with herself was the worst punishment. She reached for the glove compartment where the pills were. Not sleeping pills, just something to dull the sharpness of her thoughts. Her hands stumbled upon a crumpled piece of paper. A receipt, no. An envelope, old-fashioned, made of thick, yellowish paper. It had no address, no stamp, only her name written in elegant handwriting. Alice, you're tired of wearing masks, come. No signature, no address. Only a strange symbol at the bottom. 3 intersecting circles, resembling a model of an atom. Goosebumps ran down her spine. Where did this come from? She didn't remember taking this envelope. She turned it over and dropped it. A key fell out of the envelope, an unusual, antique one with intricate carvings, and a small card with an address, Old Town, Rook Lane, 13. 21 o'clock. The clock showed 2015. Exactly 40 minutes, accounting for the traffic jam. Change the route, Alice said, unexpectedly even to herself. To this address. Chapter 2. Entrance to the labyrinth. Maxim stood in the pouring rain, clutching a printout of a job vacancy. Development manager. Quantum Solutions. It sounded like a cult, but the salary made his heart beat faster. His last money had been spent on this suit, which was now soaked through. The building on Rook Lane turned out to be an old mansion squeezed between glass skyscrapers. It seemed to resist time, its facade covered in a web of cracks, but a warm, living light burned in its windows. The door was oak, massive. Maxim was about to ring the bell when he noticed the door was ajar. He pushed it and entered inside. The vestibule was striking in its contrast. Outside, the 18th century. Inside, futuristic high-tech. Glass panels, holographic interfaces, schematics floating in the air. And silence. Deep, ringing silence. Are you here for the interview? A voice sounded. Maxim flinched. A man in a perfectly fitting suit emerged from the shadows. Not young, but not old either. His face was unmemorable, but his eyes saw right through you. Maxim, right? Come in. You are the first. Who else is there? 3 interviews are scheduled for today, but I believe this is not a coincidence. The man escorted him to the elevator. Go up to the 3rd floor. You will be met. The elevator doors closed. Maxim pressed the button, and at that moment, the lights went out. Chapter 3. A trap for 3. Sofia ran down the lane, stumbling over the cobblestones. She was late. She was always late. Her daughter didn't want to sleep, her husband was late from work, and her portfolio with sketches suddenly seemed so pathetic and helpless to her. She burst into the vestibule, knocking over someone invisible. Or rather, she felt she had brushed against someone, but there was no one around. Only a slight ripple in the air. Sorry. She exhaled into the emptiness. A voice from nowhere answered. The 3rd one. Enter the elevator. Sofia looked around. The elevator was standing there with its doors open. She dashed towards it, and the doors slammed shut behind her. Inside were already 2 people. A striking woman in an expensive suit and a large man with a face full of disappointment. It seems we are stuck, the woman stated. It was Alice. Maxim silently pressed the buttons. Useless. Then the lights went out. Absolute darkness. The silence was broken only by Sofia's ragged sighs. And then the same voice came from the speaker. Chapter 4. Mirrors of possibility, do not worry. Help is on the way. But meanwhile, which of you is ready to become the architect of your reality? What nonsense. Maxim hissed. Get us out of here. I will get you out. The voice was calm like the surface of a lake on a windless day. But first, answer. What brought you here? Not the official reason, the true one. In the darkness, the voices sounded different, more frank. I received a key and a message. Alice was the first to break the silence. She hadn't planned to tell the truth, but the words escaped on their own. I was offered a job. Money. A lot of money, said Maxim. And I want my works to be seen, Sofia added quietly, so that I am not only a mother but also an artist. Interesting, the voice from the speaker thoughtfully drew out the word. A key, money, recognition, 3 fundamental motivators, and 3 traps. My name is the architect. it. And your presence here is not a coincidence. It is a quantum necessity. The elevator jerked and started moving upwards. When the doors opened, it wasn't a floor in front of them, but a long corridor, its walls covered with frescoes depicting themselves, Alice, standing on the edge of a roof, Maxim, lifting a barbell in an empty hall, Sofia, drawing a giant, beautiful graffiti on a wall. What is this? Sofia exhaled. Your potential realities, the voice of the architect sounded. They turned around and saw him. The same man from the vestibule. The one you live in is just one of countless versions, and it, apparently, does not suit you. Enter. He swung open the door at the end of the corridor. Chapter 5. Maps of another's consciousness. The office was round without corners. The walls were interactive screens on which complex patterns pulsed, resembling either neurons or galaxies. In the center, 3 cocoon chairs. Take a seat. Let's start with diagnostics. The architect approached the wall, and the images on it changed. Now they were 3 dynamic maps, each with its own pattern. These are maps of your neural landscapes. Alice, do you see these bright but short and chaotic spikes? This is a constant mode of anxiety and analysis. Maxim, and here, thick, rigid pathways leading to a dead end. Habitual roots of despair. Sofia, and you have, remarkably, huge potential, but all paths are blocked by this bright red node. Guilt. They silently looked at the visualization of their mental prisons. Classical psychology would try to fix these patterns. We will take a different path. We will not repair the old house. We will build a new one. And for that, tools are needed. He handed them each a strange device, resembling a watch without a dial. These are quantum compasses. They will register not your actions, but your intentions and internal states. Your first task is simply to observe. Observe how you create your current reality. For 24 hours, the compass will vibrate at key moments of your day. Your task is to record what you feel and what you think at these moments, without judgment. Like a scientist studying a rare species of butterfly. And what will that give? Asked Alice. You will find out who the real architect of your life is, and that might be shocking. He escorted them to the exit. At the door, Alice remembered. The key. Did you send it to me? The architect smiled. No, you did. Or rather, that version of you that is already free. Chapter 6. The Fear Factory. Returning to her empty apartment, Alice felt a strange emptiness. Everything was in its place. Expensive renovation, designer furniture, a view of the city. But it no longer felt like hers. She took a shower, trying to wash away the feeling of strangeness from this evening. And suddenly her quantum compass vibrated. For the first time, Alice froze. What did she feel? Irritation. Thoughts. This endless day again. Tomorrow is the meeting with investors. They will sense my uncertainty. She recorded it in the app that the architect had installed on her phone. The app was called Architect's Diary. The compass vibrated again when she looked at her bed, feeling melancholy. Thought, another night alone. The third time, when she checked her work chats, feeling anxiety. Thought, someone will do it better than me. By midnight, she had a list of 27 such moments. She realized with horror that her mind was a factory for producing fear and insecurity, and this factory worked without days off. In despair, she took that antique key. It was cold and alive to the touch. Approaching the window, she raised it to eye level, looking through the hole in the handle at the city lights, and it seemed to her that the lights for a moment folded into the same symbol. 3 intersecting circles. Chapter 7. Journey into a dead end. Maxim came home to his one-room apartment that smelled of pizza and loneliness. He threw his briefcase into a corner and reached for a beer from the refrigerator. The vibration of the compass caught him with a can in his hand. Feeling shame, thought, drowning it again? Whatever, it's all hopeless anyway. He phlegmatically took out his phone and made an entry. Feeling indifference. Thought, whatever. The next vibration, when he looked at his old photos from sports competitions. Feeling sharp, physical pain in the chest. Thought, it's all over. The best years are behind. Maxim shoved the photo album away. It was too painful. He didn't want to observe anything. He wanted to forget, but the compass vibrated again and again. Every time he tried to avoid thoughts, that very inner critic, whom he had been drowning with alcohol for years, would activate. By morning, Maxim hadn't slept. He sat on the floor among the clutter and looked at the entries in the app. It was the root of his personal hell, and he had been laying it himself every day for many years. Chapter 8. The knot of guilt for Sofia. The task turned out to be the most excruciating. Her day was scheduled by the minute. Child, household, chores, husband. The first signal of the compass sounded when she was feeding her daughter breakfast. Feeling tenderness mixed with irritation. Thought, when will this end? I want to draw. No, I'm a terrible mother for thinking that. She recorded it, feeling a pang of guilt. The next signal, when her husband, at breakfast, absent-mindedly said, "Oh, look how beautiful mommy is today," and immediately buried himself in his phone, feeling resentment. Thought, he doesn't see me. I'm just part of the interior for him. The third signal, when, having put her daughter to bed, she finally sat down at her sketchbook, feeling fear. Thought, I won't succeed. Why am I wasting time? I should mop the floor. Sofia closed the album. Tears dripped onto the paper. She looked at the entries in the app and understood her main jailer was herself. Her feeling of guilt was that red note on the map, strangling all her creative impulses. At night, she took her daughter in her arms and went to the window. The girl was sleeping, serenely burying her nose in her neck. The compass vibrated, feeling unconditional low. Thought, I am breathing, and it is beautiful. And at that moment, Sofia realized that among the chaos of her thoughts, there were also such moments, islands of peace. She just hadn't noticed them. Chapter 9. The first tool, the pause. They came to the next meeting change. Not radically transformed, but more aware, more quiet. The architect was waiting for them in the same office. Well, did you like the conductor of your internal orchestra? It's a nightmare. Maxim was the first to speak out. My brain is a dump. Not the brain, the architect corrected. The autopilot. A set of programs you once installed and now forgot how to delete. But now you know the enemy by sight, which means we can proceed to the first real tool, the quantum pause. He led them to the wall where a new diagram lit up. Between the stimulus and your reaction, there's a microscopic gap. Usually, you don't notice it. Your task is to expand it. For the next week, when the compass vibrates, you don't just observe. You do this. He showed them a simple sequence. 1. Stop. Mentally say stop. 2. Take a conscious inhale and exhale. Focus on the breathing. 3. Ask, does this thought, feelings serve me? This is not a struggle, the architect emphasized. This is observation with intention. You are the sky and thoughts are clouds. You cannot stop the clouds, but you can stop identifying with them. Sounds simple, said Alice. Simple does not mean easy. Your mind will resist. It has been accustomed to the old mode of operation for decades. But every time you create this pause, you take the first step towards becoming an architect. He handed them new maps of the terrain. Their updated neural maps. On them, there were already barely noticeable new paths, those very moments of peace they had recorded. Pay attention to these paths. They are the embryos of your new reality. Chapter 10. The test of the pause. The week of the quantum pause became a real battle for all three. Alice applied the technique during a meeting when one of her subordinates made a critical mistake. The old Alice would have exploded. The new one stopped, took a breath, and asked, is anger serving me right now? And instead of shouting, she calmly said, we are fixing it. What are the solution options? The result was achieved faster, and the team looked at her with new respect. Maxim used the pause when an inspector from the fire department came to his new, not yet opened fitness center and started nitpicking every little thing. The old Maxim would have either exploded or given in. The new one made a pause, inhaled, and asked, is irritation serving me? And instead of aggression, he calmly and confidently answered all the claims. The inspector, who expected an outburst of anger or fawning, was disarmed by this cold, architectural precision. Maxim did not defend his truth. He built it brick by brick, and the inspector had no choice but to agree with this new reality. When he left, Maxim felt not gloating, but a strange, quiet confidence. He hadn't defeated someone. He had simply stopped being his own enemy. Sofia encountered the subtlest opponent. Her husband, Lev, noticed her new detachment. You're like you're not here, he said at dinner, and his voice held not resentment, but anxiety. The compass vibrated. Stop. Inhale, exhale. Is the feeling of guilt serving me? No, it only makes me defensive. Instead of the usual sorry, I'm just tired. She looked at him and answered honestly, I'm just trying to be a little more here for myself, so that later I can be more here for you too. Lev looked at her for a few seconds, then slowly nodded. A dialogue didn't happen, but a monologue of guilt didn't happen either. Chapter 11. The second tool. Intention. A week later, they were again in the architect's office. This time the atmosphere was less tense but more focused. They were no longer victims brought for an experiment. They were students. You have taken the first, most important step. You created a buffer between reaction and action, said the architect, studying their updated maps. The neural landscapes had changed. Alice's chaotic spikes had become slightly more orderly, Maxim's dead ends less pronounced, and Sofia's red nodes seemed to have loosened a bit. You have slowed down the chaos. Now it's time to learn how to direct it. The next tool is quantum intention. A new diagram lit up on the wall. Initial chaos, then a pause, and from it, rays of possibilities fanning out. Until now, you were observers. Now you are engineers. Every quantum pause is not just a stop. It is a point of bifurcation, a moment where reality can go along any of a billion paths. Your task is, at the moment of the pause, not just to ask the question, what am I feeling? But to ask the question, what do I want to feel? And what action from this state will serve my goal? Sounds like self-hypnosis. Maxim remarked. Worse, the architect smiled. It's self-construction. Self-hypnosis is painting the walls, and you are laying the foundation of a new reality. On this foundation, we will erect the walls. Your next assignment is not just to react with a pause, but to proactively create one small event per day based on your new intention. He approached each of them. To Alice, you want control. Control not others, but your own state. Your task is to make one decision per day based not on fear, but on confidence. To Maxim, you want strength. Strength is not in muscular tension, but in flow. Your task is to do one thing per day that you consider meaningless, but that brings you joy. To Sofia, you want recognition. Recognize yourself. Your task is to state your desire once a day without apologizing or making excuses. What about the key? And that other me? Alice persisted. The architect looked at her with slight fatigue. Everything is connected, Alice. You are trying to find a simple answer, a magic door. But to turn the key in the lock, you first need to build the door. You have just begun to mix the clay for the bricks. Be patient. Chapter 12. The chime of synchronicity. The assignment to create an event turned out to be more difficult than the pause. It required not defense, but an attack on one's own inertia. Alice, during the most important merger negotiations, felt a familiar surge of anxiety. Pause. Old reality. Make concessions just to finish quickly. New reality. What do I want? Confidence. She took a shallow breath and said, the proposed terms do not suit us. I am ready to discuss option B, but only if you revise the clause on intellectual property. Silence hung in the room. The partners were shocked. Alice was no less shocked, but at that very moment, her compass didn't just vibrate. It emitted a quiet, melodic chime. For the first time, Maxim, walking in the park in the evening, saw a balloon seller. Childish, meaningless joy. Pause. What do I want? Flow. Joy. He went up and bought a huge, bright blue balloon. Passers-by looked at the large, serious man with a child's toy. At first, he felt awkward. Then, funny. And then he just walked and the balloon danced in the sky above him and he felt light. The compass chimed melodiously. Sofia, in the evening when her husband sat down to watch TV, approached him. Pause. What do I want? To be seen. Without apologizing, she said, I'm going to the studio. I'm going to draw. I need an hour. An hour and a half. Can you be with our daughter? Lev looked at her surprised, then nodded. Of course. Not what's wrong. And not your drawing again? Just of course. Something unfolded in her chest as if invisible fetters had fallen away. Her compass responded with a melodic chime. They weren't just completing assignments. They were hearing feedback from reality itself. Chapter 13. The reality constructor. Congratulations, said the architect at the next session, looking at their shining, slightly frightened faces. You have heard the chime of synchronicity. This means your internal intention and external reality have begun to resonate. You are no longer drifting with the current. You have begun to create the current. He led them to the center of the room where a holographic model rose from the floor, a complex, iridescent structure resembling a castle of light. This is the reality constructor, for now in simulation mode. At this stage, we will learn not just to create individual events, but to design entire chains. Life is not a set of random moments. It is a narrative, a story you tell yourself, and you will learn to rewrite it. He touched the interface, and the structure disintegrated into basic elements. Right now, your story is a drama, partly a tragedy. We will add elements of a different genre. The suspense of uncertainty, the comedy of the absurd, the poetry of simple moments. Your task for the week is every evening, looking back on the day, to rewrite one key episode. Not as it was, but as it could have been if you had acted from your best self. Record these alternative scenarios in the architect's diary. That's just fantasizing. Alice doubted. Any realized innovation was once someone's fantasy, the architect parried. First, you build in the mind, then in energy, and only then in matter. You are preparing the blueprints for your new light. Suddenly, the light in the office dimmed and the holographic castle trembled. On the screens behind the architect, interference flickered for a second, and in it, a distorted face was discernible. His own, but old, haggard, full of pain. Everyone froze. What was that? Sofia asked quietly. The architect was calm, but his calm now seemed tense. He regained control of the systems. That was the shadow, he said simply. An echo of one of the realities that I once did not build but destroy. It is always nearby. As a reminder, for all architects, there is one main rule. He looked at them each in turn, and for the first time, there was genuine, bottomless seriousness in his eyes. Before erecting something new, you need to clear the space. And sometimes in the rubble of the old, you can find not only garbage, but also unexploded shells. Be careful with your ruins. You may awaken what you would prefer to forget. He left, leaving them in stunned silence. For the first time, they clearly understood they were not playing a psychological game. They were participating in something much deeper and more dangerous. And their teacher was not an omnipotent guru. He was the same person, a hostage to his own, much larger quantum mistakes. And Alice, leaving the building, felt the cold metal of the key in her pocket. Now she understood. It was not the key to the door into her new reality. It was the key to the door out of the old one. And she had to build that door herself. Chapter 14. The first cracks, the silence in the limousine on the way back was deafening. The previous meetings had filled them with a strange excitement, a mixture of fear and hope. Now there was only cold, sober realization. They were playing with fire, and their teacher himself was scorched by the flame. Alice looked at the city lights but saw the architect's distorted face in the interference. The shadow. What had he destroyed? And what were they following him at risk of destroying in their own lives? Maxim felt a surge of adrenaline. Danger was a familiar environment for him, but this one was of a different order. It wasn't the risk of failure or physical threat. It was a threat to his very self. Unexploded shells. What shells had he laid himself, burying his dreams and disappointments for years? Sofia was thinking about her daughter. Was it worth it? Was it worth risking the fragile balance of her family by digging in these rubble? But the thought of returning to her former self, to the one who mopped the floor with a sense of guilt for her unrealized talent, was even more frightening. Their compasses were silent, as if reality itself was holding its breath, waiting. Chapter 15. The drafts of a new life, the assignment to rewrite episodes, turned out to be the most difficult internal work. In the evening, Alice, analyzing her day, chose the moment when her deputy made an unfortunate joke, and she, out of old habit, gave a strained smile, feeling irritation. In her architect's diary, she wrote an alternative scenario. Episode, Peter's joke, reaction, fake smile, irritation. Rewritten scenario. I do not smile. I look at him calmly and say, Peter, I didn't understand your joke. Explain what's funny about it. I do not judge. I show curiosity. Perhaps he will be embarrassed. Perhaps he will explain. But it will be honest. It will give him a signal about my boundaries and me, a sense of integrity. Rereading what she had written, she felt not comfort, but anxiety. Being honest meant being vulnerable, and vulnerability in her world was equated with weakness. Maxim was rewriting his evening with beer. Instead of drowning out his thoughts, he wrote, Episode, Evening, Loneliness, Beer. Reaction, acceptance of defeat. Rewritten scenario. I do not open the beer. I put on my sneakers and go for a night run. Just because, without a goal, I run through the sleeping city and my breathing is the only sound that matters. I return tired but clean, and fall asleep without thoughts. He imagined it so vividly that he almost felt the night chill in his lungs, and he realized how much his beer ritual was a slow suicide. Sofia was rewriting the morning argument with her husband over scattered toys. Episode: Lev threw his jacket on the chair. I pounced on him with reproaches. Rewritten scenario: I see the jacket. I pause. I go over, hang it in the closet. When Lev comes in, I say, I hung up your jacket. It's important to me that the living room is tidy. Let's agree. You will try, and I will remind you calmly. Writing this, she cried, because she understood her old scenario was not about the jacket, but about accumulated resentment. And the new one required incredible inner strength she seemingly didn't have. Chapter 16. The architect's curse. After a few days of practice, their worlds began to glitch. For real. Alice, on an important phone call, suddenly clearly saw her office, but with cracks on the walls. The wallpaper was peeling in places, revealing rough concrete. She blinked, and everything became familiar again. Her heart was pounding. The shadow flashed through her mind. Maxim, working out with weights in his gym, for a second felt that he was standing not in an empty room but in a packed hall, under a deafening roar from the stands. He even physically felt the weight of a gold medal around his neck. The sensation was so real that he almost dropped the barbell. The vision disappeared, leaving behind a bitter taste of loss and a question. Was it a memory or a mirage of another reality? The most frightening thing happened to Sofia. She was putting her daughter to bed, reading a fairy tale, and suddenly the child's voice changed, became older, colder. The girl opened her eyes, and they were alien, adult, full of contempt. Mom, why didn't you achieve anything? She hissed. Sofia recoiled in horror. The daughter was herself again, whining sleepily and rubbing her eyes with her fists. Mommy, keep reading. Sofia was shaking. This was not a glitch in reality. It was a glitch in her soul. Her greatest fear had found a voice, without conspiring, but simultaneously. They send a message to the architect. Something is wrong with us. We need to meet. Chapter 17. The point of no return. The architect received them immediately, but not in the office, but in an empty, white hall where there were no screens, only for chairs in a circle. He looked tired. Tell me, he asked shortly. They took turns describing their visions. When they finished, the architect sighed heavily. I underestimated the speed, or overestimated your readiness. You are not just rewriting scripts, you are shaking the foundation. The cracks in Alice's walls are cracks in her perception of her world's reliability. Maxim's stands are an echo of unrealized potential that he still carries within him. And you, Sofia, he looked at her with a strange pity. You encountered the most dangerous thing, the projection of your inner critic. It found your most vulnerable spot and put on your daughter's mask to strike more accurately. What does this mean? Alice's voice trembled with restrained fury. You didn't warn us. We could have gone mad. Warn you? The architect smiled bitterly. How do you warn someone who has never drowned about what it's like to struggle with the current? You wouldn't have understood. Yes, you are in danger. The psyche is trying to preserve the old order, clinging to the most painful hoax. You are digging up your shells. Some of them are booby traps. We are stopping, Maxim stated firmly. The game is not worth the candle. It's too late. The architect shook his head. The door is ajar. If you retreat now, the shadow will not disappear. It will grow. These visions will become more frequent. You will either end up in a neurosis clinic or return to your old life, but with one difference. You will know that you gave up, and this knowledge will gnaw at you from the inside for the rest of your days. Oppressive silence hung in the white room. So, the only way out is to go forward, Sofia said quietly, looking at her hands. Forward, but with protection. It's time to move to the active phase. It's time not just to rewrite scripts, but to embody them. With small, but real steps, you must prove to your psyche that the new reality is not a fantasy, but the only possible path to survival. For this, you will need the final tool, the quantum bridge. He stood up and walked around the circle. The bridge is an action you perform in the physical world, fully corresponding to your new intention. It should be small, but symbolically powerful. It will cement your new blueprint in reality. Find your bridge, perform it within 48 hours. This is your survival exam. Chapter 18. the bridge into the unknown 48 hours. 48 hours to find an act that would change everything. Alice wandered around her impeccable apartment. What would be her bridge? Fire Peter? Too simple. That's an old pattern of control. Her gaze fell on a box with childhood photos that she hadn't opened for years. She was afraid of that girl with the sad eyes, the one everyone wanted to remake. The bridge, to acknowledge her. She took out the box, placed it on the coffee table, not to look through it, but just to allow it to be here. This was a bridge between her past and present self. Maxim stood in front of his gym. His bridge was obvious. He took a can of paint and on the huge white wall at the entrance, he wrote in bold letters, "Gym for those who don't give up." Then, inside, on a small piece of paper, he wrote, "Free training for those who have no money. Ask for Maxim," and stuck it on the reception desk. This was a bridge between his selfish despair and service to others. Sofia looked for a long time at the door to her tiny studio. Her bridge was the scariest of all. She took her phone and wrote in the chat of local artists, which she had been afraid to enter for years. "I have several works, looking for an opportunity for a first exhibition, ready to help with organization." She wasn't asking, not apologizing, she was declaring herself. This was a bridge between her kitchen and the big world. When the last message was sent, all three felt not a chime of synchronicity, but something else, a dull, powerful blow, as if a huge mechanism somewhere in the foundation of the universe had shifted and locked into a new position. They hadn't just changed their behavior, they had changed the landscape of their destiny. And somewhere in the darkness, in another layer of reality, the architect's shadow, feeling this shift, smiled. The grin was full of hunger and anticipation. The game was just beginning. Chapter 19. The seismic shift. The blow was not a sound, but a seismic shift in the very fabric of their being. The ground didn't disappear from under their feet, but the world around them lost its familiar outlines for a second, becoming fluid and unsteady, like a mirage. Alice, standing in front of the open box of photographs, felt an icy cold run down her back. Replaced by heat, she didn't just see her younger self. She felt that girl, the smell of her school uniform, the bitterness of an unfair remark from a teacher, the delight of her first drawing. Memory crashed down on her not as a stream of images, but as a squall of lived emotions. She grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. This was not a glitch. It was a return home to the abandoned fortress of her own soul. Maxim, stepping back from the painted wall, suddenly felt not heaviness in his muscles, but incredible lightness, as if a backpack of stones he had been carrying for years had been taken off him. The inscription, "Gym for those who don't give up," glowed for him not just with paint. It was an oath burned onto his shield. And when he looked at the note about free training, his heart tightened not from fear, but from anticipation. For the first time in many years, he was thinking not about what he could lose, but about what he could give. Sofia, having sent the message, dropped her phone. Her palms were wet, there was a ringing in her ears. But it wasn't the ring of alarm, it was the ring of freedom, as if a heavy, invisible chain shackled to her ankle had snapped. She had done it. She had challenged not her husband, not circumstances, but her own inner jailer. And the jailer retreated, frightened by her sudden determination. A few minutes later, the first response appeared in the chat. "Hi, we're just putting together a group exhibition at the former factory. There's a free wall. Can you send photos of your works?" Sofia slowly, as in a ritual, sat down on the floor and cried. But now these were tears of purification. Chapter 20. The jug, the ball, and the plant. The meeting at the mansion this time was different. The architect awaited them not in the office or the white room, but in a spacious hall with a high glass dome through which moonlight streamed. In the center, on a low table, stood three objects: an old, cracked clay jug, a perfectly polished metal ball, and a living, breathing plant in a pot. He watched them enter, and his gaze was heavy as lead. "You have made the bridge. You have passed the point of no return. Congratulations, or my condolences. Time will tell." He looked at each of them. "Your neural maps look." He didn't turn on the holograms. They manifested right in the air, surrounding each person. Alice's map no longer resembled a chaotic storm. It was a complex, multi-layered model where every line was meaningful and connected to another. Maxim's powerful, straight channels through which energy flowed, no longer hitting dead ends. Sofia's, the red note of guilt had not disappeared, but it was entangled and pierced dye-bright. Golden threads of new confidence, depriving it of its destructive power. You haven't just changed your thinking, you have changed the architecture of your consciousness. But be prepared. The system you hacked will try to restore the status quo. Your old lives will call you back. Whisper in your ear that all this is an illusion, and that will be the most dangerous moment. The architect approached the table and touched the jug. The old reality, fragile, cracked, but familiar. He poked a crack and it widened slightly. Then he took the metal ball. The new reality you are trying to build. Perfect, durable, but soulless. A cold abstraction. Finally, he touched a leaf of the plant, and this is the present. Living, breathing, unpredictable. It is not perfect. It can get sick, insects can eat it. But it is life. Do not strive for the ball. Strive for this. He looked at Alice. Your key. It is time to use it. Alice flinched. How? Where? It unlocks not a door in the wall. It unlocks a door in time. A specific moment that became a trap for you. You must return there. Not to change the past. That would create a paradox. To rewrite your attitude towards it. Reassemble the event in your memory, depriving it of power over you. The architect's face became stern, but I warn you, when you do this, you will release your shadow. The very one that whispered to your daughter, Sofia. The one that showed you the stands, Maxim. The one that appeared to me in the form of my old face. It feeds on our pain. And when you take this piece away from it, it will become tangible. For all of us. Chapter 21. The unexploded shells. The task was clear and frightening. To find the key traumatic event and relive it from the position of the architect, not the victim. Alice spent the whole night in a meditation dictated by the compass. She plunged deep into herself until she hit a wall. A moment she had tried not to remember for decades. She is 15. She stands before her father and shows him her drawing. A portrait of her mother. Her father, tired and irritated, casts a fleeting glance at the drawing and says, Alice, do something useful. Art is for idlers. You must be strong. That was when she slammed the door on her creative, sensitive part and put on the first mask of the strong girl. Maxim found his moment at the bottom of an empty bottle. He is 22. The final competition where he was supposed to make the decisive throw, but he makes a mistake. The team loses. He hears not the roar of the crowd, but a deathly silence, and sees the coach's eyes, full not of anger, but of regret. At that moment, he decided that his strength would always fail him at the most important moment. Sofia returned to the day she was 18, choosing between entering an art academy in another city and her relationship with Lev. Her mother, holding her hand, said pleadingly, Don't leave. You will destroy the family. You will be alone. True happiness is here. And Sofia stayed. And since then, any attempt to create was accompanied by a whisper, You could have left, but you chose family. Now, please be the perfect wife and mother. Don't aspire to more. They had found their unexploded shells. Chapter 22. The mirror room. The architect created a mirror room for them, a room where the walls, floor, and ceiling were made of matte black glass, reflecting not their appearance but their internal states. 3 chairs stood in the center. You will do this here together, he said. Your connection will be the anchor. You cannot do this alone. When one of you plunges into their past, the other 2 must hold them here and now, not allowing the shadow to drag them away completely. They sat in the chairs, forming a triangle. Alice volunteered to go first. She clutched the key in her hand. It was icy. Immerse yourself in that moment, the architect commanded quietly. But now you are not a girl. You are the architect. Enter that scene and change not the event but its meaning. Alice closed her eyes. The room filled with mist. The walls disappeared and instead the familiar living room of her childhood appeared. She saw herself, a skinny girl with a drawing in trembling hands. She saw her father. Chapter 23. Writing the past. Alice dad looked. The old Alice froze, awaiting the verdict. But the new Alice, the one sitting in the chair, took a step forward inside this memory. She was invisible, but her presence was felt. She approached the girl and mentally, putting all the strength of her adult self into the message, said, His words are not about you. They are about his fear, about his own unfulfilled light. Your drawing is beautiful. Your feeling is real. You have the right to be both strong and sensitive. You are whole. Something shifted in the memory. The father uttered his phrase, but now his voice sounded muffled, as if from behind glass. The girl Alice flinched but did not lower her head. She looked at the drawing, then at her father, and slowly folded the paper. Not broken, but making a decision to preserve this treasure inside herself until the time came. In the mirror room, Alice cried out. Tears didn't flow from her eyes. What seemed like black smoke, swirling and dense, streamed from them. This smoke rose with a hiss to the ceiling and began to gather in a corner, forming a vague, human-like figure. Hold her, the architect shouted to Maxim and Sofia. Maxim grabbed Alice's hand. You are here, you are with us, he said roughly, almost like a commander. Sofia, trembling herself, put a hand on her shoulder. We are here, Alice. We are with you. The shadow in the corner stirred but could not approach. Chapter 24. Writing the past, Maxim now it was Maxim's turn. His immersion was fierce, full of muscular tension. He was again on the court, smelling sweat and floor polish. He saw the mist, heard the silence, and then his adult self entered that scene. This is not a failure. This is the starting point. Strength is not in never falling. Strength is in getting up every time. This mist did not define you. It freed you from the need to always be a winner. You can be just a human, and in that lies your true strength. In the memory, the young Maxim, instead of hunching in shame, straightened up. He looked at his teammates, nodded to them, acknowledging the shared defeat, and in that gesture, there was no weakness. There was dignity. A cloud of black, sticky energy burst from Maxim's chest with a strong exhalation. It joined the shadow in the corner, and it became clearer, acquiring more masculine, powerful outlines. Sofia, your turn. Hold him. Alice, who had already come to her senses, grabbed his other hand, and Maxim, gritting his teeth, pressed into the chair, fighting the chaos erupting from within him. Chapter 25. Rewriting the past, Sofia closed her eyes. She was again in her old room with a suitcase half-packed for the trip to the academy. Her mother was crying in front of her, and her adult self said to that 18-year-old girl, you are not responsible for your mother's happiness. Her fear is her choice. Your life is your choice. Love is not a sacrifice. Love is supporting each other's growth. You could have left and become an artist, and your family, your true family, would have accepted that. You stayed not out of love, but out of fear. Forgive yourself, and forgive her. In the memory, the young Sofia stopped crying. She looked at her mother with infinite pity and love devoid of guilt. She did not argue. She simply finished packing the suitcase in her imagination, completing the inner ritual of farewell to the unfulfilled. A shadow of fear and guilt fluttered out of Sofia's heart like a frightened bird. It merged with the general mass in the corner. The shadow took full form. It was not a monster. It was their common entity woven from fear, guilt, and pain. It resembled a distorted reflection of all three at once. Its eyes were empty, its mouth stretched in a soundless scream. It was the absolute negation of their new self. It took a step out of the corner. What now? Alice asked in a choked voice, rising from the chair. The key in her hand suddenly became warm. The architect stood between them and the shadow. Now, he said, and for the first time, his voice held not only fatigue but also determination. You look your fear in the face, and you make a choice to run, or to accept it as a part of yourself, depriving it of power. This is your final bridge, the bridge to your whole self. The shadow extended its hand, not towards them, towards the architect, as if calling him back to that reality he had once destroyed. Chapter 26. Face to face with a shadow, the silence in the mirror room was ringing dense, like before a thunderclap. The shadow, their combined fear, was not aggressive. It was hungry. Its outstretched hand towards the architect was not a threat, but an invitation back to the comfortable, familiar swamp of despair. The architect did not flinch. He looked at the shadow not as an enemy, but as an old and happy acquaintance. No, he said quietly, but the words sounded louder than any shout. I will not return, and they will not either. The shadow made a sound like the hiss of red-hot metal plunged into icy water. It was the sound of absolute rejection. The choice is yours, the architect said to the three without turning away from the shadow. You can accept it, not as a master but as a part, like a scar that reminds you of an old wound but no longer hurts, or it will consume you and everything you have built will crumble to dust. Chapter 27. The final bridge they stood, paralyzed by fear, seeing before them the materialized embodiment of everything that had held them captive for years. And Maxim was the first to step forward. He was not a hero. He was simply someone who was tired of being afraid. "You are my failure," he said to the shadow, and his voice was hoarse but firm. "You are the voice that whispered to me that I was worthless. You know what?" He took another step. "You were right back then, but now, no. You are just a memory, a ghost, and ghosts have no power over those who have stopped believing in them." The shadow shuddered, and its outlines wavered for a moment. It retreated a step. Sofia, still feeling the icy breath of fear on her neck, straightened up. Tears streamed down her face, but fire burned in her eyes. "And you are my guilt," she whispered. "You made me think my creativity was selfish, that being myself meant betraying my family. But I understood. A real family is where you are supported, not buried alive. One choose myself. And I forgive you. I forgive you for all the years you stole." The second step. The shadow swayed as if losing form. Its soundless scream became quieter. All eyes turned to Alice. She was clutching the key. It was now hot like a live coal. "And you." Alice's voice was cold and pure as steel. "You are my masks. All those faces I put on to be loved, to be feared, to be respected. But beneath them, there was no one. You stole me from myself." She raised the key. It glowed from within, and the three intersecting circles on its handle flared with a dazzling white light. "But I have returned. I have found myself. And you can no longer hold me." She did not attack. She simply let go. Let go of the need for approval, the fear of being weak, the rage over betrayal. She accepted her vulnerability as strength. She directed the light of the key not at the shadow, but in front of herself, onto the floor. And in that light, a door did not appear. A bridge appeared, a sparkling, iridescent path leading from the darkness into the unknown, but into their own unknown. Chapter 28. The birth of architects. The shadow, deprived of their fear, their guilt, and their masks, began to disintegrate. It did not disappear with a bang, but dissolved like fog in the morning sun, emitting one last plaintive sigh. The room fell quiet again. They stood, breathing heavily, looking at the empty corner. Something huge and heavy had left the room, had left them themselves. The architect turned to them. On his face was not a smile, but a deep, immeasurable fatigue and respect. "You did it. You did not destroy your shadow. You integrated it. You have become whole. Now you are not students. You are architects, full-fledged." He approached Alice and looked at the key. The glow had faded, but it was still warm. "This key, it was not from the door of your past. It was from the lock on your own power, and you have unlocked it." Alice nodded, unable to utter a word. "And what now?" Maxim asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Is the project completed?" The architect shook his head. His gaze became detached. He was looking somewhere far away, through the walls. "The first stage is completed. You have cleared the site and poured the foundation, but the building of your new life, it still needs to be erected. And believe me, building is always harder than breaking." He slowly walked around the room, and for a moment his figure seemed incredibly old and lonely. "My task here is done. I have given you the tools. The rest is your path. Are you leaving?" Sofia asked. "In a sense, the shadow you just saw was only an echo, a reverberation of my own failure, the very one you saw on the screens. Now that you are strong, it is time for me to return to my battle, and to finish what I once started." He looked at them for the last time, and a shadow of that same old pain flickered in his eyes. "Remember, being an architect does not mean finding peace. It means accepting responsibility for the chaos, and for the order you create from it. The world is full of sleepers, people who wear masks, live in dead ends, and choke on guilt. Some of them may be close to you." With these words, he turned and left the mirror room. The door closed behind him silently. They were left alone, three of them, in complete silence, but now this silence was not frightening, but filled with possibilities. Chapter 29. Epilogue. The calm before the storm. Epilogue. A week later, Alice sat in her office, but something in it had changed. On the desk, next to the monitors, stood that very childhood photograph in a simple frame. She was conducting a meeting, and when one of the managers began to fawn over her, she gently but firmly stopped him. "I need your expertise, not your agreement. Say what you think." There was no aggression in her voice. There was confidence. Later in the evening, she took out an old sketchbook from a far drawer and drew a line. The first one in many, many years. Maxim stood in his gym. Next to him, a skinny teenager was working out, the very one who had come for the free training. The boy was trying his best, and Maxim corrected his stance without the usual severity, with a patience he didn't know he possessed. He no longer felt like a has-been. He felt real. Sofia, together with her husband Lev, was hanging her works in a loft at the former factory. Lev silently helped, sometimes stopping and looking at a sketch for a long time. "I didn't know you could. Like this," he finally said. "I didn't fully know myself," Sofia smiled. And in her smile, there was no former apologetic sadness. There was a slight sadness for the time that had passed and joy that her time had finally come. They did not become inseparable friends, but a connection remained between them, invisible like quantum entanglement. They knew that there were two others in the world who saw the cracks in reality and who knew the price of being whole. One evening, Alice received a message on her phone from an unknown number. There was no text, only an image, the same symbol of 3 intersecting circles, but now one of the circles was filled, like the nucleus of an atom, and beneath it, a single phrase, "The architect is gone. His shadow remains, and it is not alone. Prepare for a new project." Alice slowly looked up from the phone and looked out the window at the night city. It no longer seemed like a foreign fortress to her. It was an endless field for construction. She reached for her quantum compass lying on the table. It was cold and lifeless, but she knew this was only the calm before the storm. She smiled, not a happy smile, the smile of a warrior who knows the battle is just beginning. End of Book 1.